I don't know about you, but I like to sit as close to the front as possible. All the action, it happens at the front, not at the back. So today we are going to look at what can happen if you can just get to the front. So grab yourself a front row seat. I'll be right back. So as I opened up in my introduction, I was saying that I like to sit as close to the front as possible. So whenever I go to the movies, when I go into a movie theater, I try to sit as close to the front as possible. I mean, not too close to where I have to just kind of lean back and have a cramp in my neck because I'm trying to look up at the screen, but as close as I can because I want to be able to see good and I want to be able to hear good. Whenever I go to church, oh my goodness, yes, in church, I always have sat at the front, in the front, as close to the front at least as I can, because I want to hear the word. I want to be able to see what the minister is saying. I want to be able to hear what the minister is saying. And it always seems to be like when you're sitting kind of in the back, there's so much distraction back there. I don't want to be distracted. And when I go to my favorite restaurant, I went on vacation not too long ago, and the restaurant that I love to go to is called Captain George. It's a seafood restaurant, and I just love it, love it. They opened at 3 o'clock. They actually opened at 4, but they had what's called an early catch, where if you got there at 3 o'clock, you saved a couple of dollars. Well, I like to be at the front, and I already knew it's a popular place, so it is going to be crowded. There's going to be a line. So you know what I did. I got there early. I got there about 2:45. I sat in my car. The parking lot already had cars in it, so I already knew what the deal was. I wasn't the only one that wanted to be up front. And sure enough, about 2:50, people started getting out of their cars. Well, you know, I hurried up and got out of my car too, and everybody was walking fast because everybody wanted to be at the front, because we just want to be at the front. We want to make sure that we're going to get in. The place was big enough. It wasn't like you weren't going to go get in. But I try to go early. If I know there's going to be a line, I try to go early so I can be at the front, because that's where the action starts. That's where the action is. So we're going to look at a person today who figured it out that, you know what? I just need to get to the front, because if I get to the front, something is going to happen. So we are going to go to Mark chapter 5. Mark chapter 5. And let's start at verse 21. It says, "Now when Jesus had crossed over again by boat to the other side, a great multitude gathered to him, and he was by the sea." Now I want you to pay close attention to great multitude, okay? Great multitude. Everywhere that Jesus went, there was always a great multitude. There was always a crowd of people that was surrounding him, okay? Verse 22, "And behold, one of the rulers of the synagogue came, Jairus by name. And when he saw him, he fell at his feet and begged him earnestly, saying, 'My little daughter lies at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her, that she may be healed, and she will live.' Verse 24 says, "So Jesus went with him, and a great multitude followed him and thronged him." So not only was he surrounded by people everywhere that he went, because, you know, when Jesus came on the scene, he started changing water to wine. He started increasing food, started raising the dead. He started doing things that had never been done and never been seen before. So crowds of people just began to come around him, some just to look, some to receive what it is that he could do for them, some so that he could pray for them or lay hands on them. But regardless of the reasons for, you know, people love to see a spectacle, okay? You know, crowds of people every time something goes on. And sometimes, you know, if you just see a crowd, I remember we were in a downtown city one time, and there was a crowd of people around. Now, we were going on about our business, but all of a sudden we saw this crowd, and we said, come on, let's see what's going on. We had to see what's going on, because hey, if there's a crowd, there must be something worth seeing. And I can't even remember what it was that people were watching. But Jesus always had a crowd of people around him. And then it says they not only did this great multitude follow him, but it thronged him. The word throng means that they were to come close to, be in close. So you can imagine there was very little room for him to move, let alone to breathe. But he was accustomed to this. He was used to this. This was his life. Verse 25. Now a certain woman had a flow of blood for 12 years. Notice 12 years. And had suffered many things from many physicians. She had spent all that she had and was no better, but rather grew worse. So I want you to picture this crowd of people. You know, Jesus is walking along. Jairus comes up. He says, you know what? Please, I need you to come. My daughter is near the point of death, and I just need you to come, because if you lay your hands on her, she is going to be healed. So Jesus is, making his way. His disciples is making his way, and all this crowd of people is also making their way and going with him as well. But he's interrupted. He's interrupted because it says that this woman who came into the presence of had a dilemma. And her dilemma was that she had a flow of blood for 12 years. Now, of course, in biblical days, they did not have a name for whatever this was that she had. But I looked this up because I wanted to see, what is this that she had? Well, today, if she was living in today's times, she would have been diagnosed with menorrhagia. Menorrhagia. And menorrhagia is a issue where you have a woman has uncontrollable bleeding or heavy menstrual cycles. Okay, so it's one thing to have a heavy menstrual cycle. All right, now it says it's the medical term for menstrual periods with abnormally heavy or prolonged bleeding. So you have heavy and prolonged bleeding. Although heavy menstrual bleeding is a common concern, most women don't expect blood loss severe enough for it to be defined as menorrhagia. So this is saying that, even though there might be a heavy flow or a prolonged bleeding, in most cases, the severeness of it, the severity of it is not enough for it to be diagnosed as menorrhagia. But this woman had not only did she have a heavy flow and prolonged bleeding, she had been bleeding for 12 years. So think on that. Now, men, this may not seem too significant to you, but it should be significant to anybody, just the thought of, having any type of issue where blood is flowing from your body. Not 1 week, not 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, 1 year, but 12 long years. With menorrhagia, you can't, listen to this, with menorrhagia, you can't maintain your usual activities. When you have your period, because you have so much blood loss and cramping. If you dread your period because you have such heavy menstrual bleeding, talk with your doctor. There are many effective treatments for menorrhagia. So here and now, and just kind of taking an aside note here, and I'm speaking to women. Now, if you're having any type of issues, and I'm saying this because a friend of mine and even myself experienced this. Now, I didn't have menorrhagia, but I had fibroid tumors. And fibroid tumors did the same thing. They caused me to have a very, very heavy flow and cramping. And it was just so uncomfortable. It was so inconvenient. I was on the road traveling, had to stop several times to go to a store because I had soiled my clothes, had to, get new clothes, so forth and so on, and without giving you all of the details. But I eventually got it checked out, and it was fibroid tumors. So women, if you're having an unusually heavy menstrual cycle, I encourage you to go see your doctor because something is going on, something's wrong. Okay, so this woman had menorrhagia for 12 years. It says, and not only did she have that, she went to doctors. Okay, she went to doctors. She suffered many things. She, gave all the money that she had. She went to this doctor and went to that doctor, and no doctor was able to help her. In fact, it said that her situation, it got worse. Now, that's par for the course, because when you think about it, there's issues in life that are bleeding, causing us to bleed out, so to speak. And it seems like no matter what we do, they get worse and they get worse, because it is a spiritual issue and we're trying to solve it with natural means. And that's not going to work. It's not going to happen. Now, hers was a physical issue, but think about those issues that you may have and that you may be experiencing that you can't be diagnosed by the doctor. That anger issue, okay, that low self-esteem issue, that bitterness issue, or the issue of unforgiveness, or the issue of abuse and shame and guilt. All of these issues cause you to bleed out. And if you're talking about childhood trauma, things that happened to you when a child and you are an adult, and you've been carrying these for a long time, and you may have sought out help. And, we had this conversation before. There's no shame as a believer in going to get counseling. Let me just be straight up about it. There's no shame in that. But you've been to counseling and they weren't able to help you either. Okay. So this woman, she had a physical issue, but you can imagine with having this physical issue that there were psychological issues and trauma that she had just because of this physical issue. Sometimes physical ailments and disabilities in our body, not sometimes, when we have severe physical ailments and disabilities in our body, it causes some trauma to our minds, because we think that we are less of a person, or there's things that we may not be able to do. And we're going to go into this a little bit more to see what actually did this woman suffer, because not only did she suffer physically in her body, because when you think about it, any blood loss, if you lose any type of blood, you're going to be weak. The blood that I was losing, it caused me to be weak. It caused me to be anemic. Those kinds of things will cause other issues to where you're getting tired, okay? You can't move. You can't do anything. You don't want to do anything. All you want to do is sleep. And we know that, the loss of blood can be a serious thing. So it says that, but her situation grew worse, okay? But verse 27 tells us that when she heard about Jesus, she came behind him in the crowd and touched his garment. I love the fact that it says when she heard about him. Okay. Now, again, going back to her situation, this was chronic. This was a chronic disorder. And, that kind of a condition, as we said, would cause you to have a difficult life. So she needed some relief and she needed an answer. So let's talk about some of those issues. Sexually, okay, she couldn't touch her husband, or if she was married, okay, she couldn't be with her husband. Maternally, she couldn't bear children. She couldn't have children, because if you can't touch your husband, or your husband can't touch you and can't get close to you, you're not going to be able to have any children. She couldn't touch anything because everything that she touched was unclean. Okay. So imagine, being in her home and, touching her furnishings, trying to wash dishes, trying to cook, trying to clean. The mop would be unclean. The dish rag would be unclean. The vacuum cleaner would be unclean. I know they didn't have vacuum cleaners, but you get my drift. So this was just her day-to-day life. And spiritually, she would be unclean. She would not be able to go into the temple. So imagine that, not even being able to go into the temple to worship God. So we're talking about it affected her relationships. It affected her day-to-day living. It affected her spiritual life. And again, issues of life bitterness, unforgiveness, shame, guilt, whatever your issue may be that's causing you to bleed out, it's going to affect your day-to-day living. It's going to affect every area of your life. Not to mention that she had to been and was physically exhausted because she's losing blood, and ostracized because people knew they could not be around her, and she knew that she could not be around them. So she needed help. She needed help in a bad sort of way. Let's look at, I want to share with you about the Levitical laws, because, you know, the Hebrews and the Jewish people had laws that dealt with uncleanness. Okay, so let's look at Leviticus chapter 15. Leviticus chapter 15. So, you know, this is a serious situation that she has found herself in. And it says for 12 years, you know, I often think about, I wonder how old was she? You know, was she, and did she have family? You know, was she a single woman? Was she married? I believe that she probably was married. You know, there weren't too many single women in the Bible days. It was everybody's desire to be married. So perhaps she was married. But what kind of marriage did she have, as we already said? And if she had children, what kind of mother or relationship could she even have with her children? Leviticus chapter 15. And we're going to start at verse 19. So, you know, this was interesting when I read Leviticus. I started at verse 1, but it was interesting when I was reading it because it started off talking about men and uncleanness with men. But I kept going down because I wanted to get to women. You know, this woman who, you know, had this uncleanness state going on with her life. Okay, it tells us, and it described her to a T. Leviticus 15:19. If a woman has a discharge, and the discharge from her body is blood, she shall be set apart 7 days, and whoever touches her shall be unclean until evening. So now this is talking about a regular cycle, menstrual cycle, say for 7 days. It says that she shall be unclean and set apart for 7 days. So she can't come outside. She can't be around people. No one can touch her. No one can be I shouldn't say no one can be in her midst, because they can be in her midst, but they literally had to practice social distancing. Okay. And if someone did by any chance touch her by accident, however, it said that they would be unclean as well, and they would be unclean until evening. So not only was she unclean, but if anyone came into her midst and if anyone touched her, if they touched her, they would be unclean too. 20, everything that she lies on during her impurity shall be unclean. So that takes care of everything that she sat on. If she sat on the sofa, that sofa was unclean. When she laid in her bed, the bed sheets were unclean. When she sat in the chair, it was unclean. When she rode on the camel, on the saddle, it was unclean. Can you imagine that? And this went on with this woman for 12 years. What kind of life can you have when you can't travel? What kind of life can you have when, you know, people won't even come into your house because they know that you probably sat on that sofa, or you sat in that chair, or you sat in that living room, and they're not going to be able to sit down. So what are they going to do? Come in the house and just stand there to talk with you? No, I doubt that they would even come. I doubt that they would even come. So we're talking also about being ostracized. Can you imagine what was going on in her mind? How that affected her emotions, how that affected her self-esteem? Okay. 21 says, whoever touches her bed shall wash his clothes and bathe in water and be unclean until evening. So if you touched anything that she sat on, and in this case it's talking about her bed. So if she had a husband, he wasn't sleeping in the bed with her. Definitely not. But it said that they would have to wash their clothes and bathe in water, and they would be unclean until evening. 22 says, and whoever touches anything that she sat on shall wash his clothes and bathe in water and be unclean until evening. If anything is on her bed, or on anything on which she sits. When he touches it, he shall be unclean until evening. So if anything touches it, if she was sitting on her bed and she was combing her hair and the comb fell on the bed, the comb was unclean. Uncleanness. We're talking about an unclean physical situation. If any man lies with her at all, so that her impurity is on him, he shall be unclean 7 days, and every bed on which he lies shall be unclean. So that lets us know right there was nothing going on if she was married with her husband, because he couldn't, because she was unclean. And if he dared to touch her in her uncleanness, he would be unclean as well. 23. If a woman has a discharge of blood for many days. Now listen to this. If a woman, so those first verses was talking about just a regular cycle, 7 days or less. Okay. If a woman has a discharge of blood for many days, other than at the time of her customary impurity, or if it runs beyond her usual time of impurity. Listen to this. All the days of her unclean discharge shall be as the days of her customary impurity. So if this discharge ran past or was outside of or was prolonged, which menorrhagia is, if it was prolonged past the usual menstrual cycle, she had to practice everything as if she was just having a regular cycle. So that meant for 12 years, no one could come near her. 12 years, whatever she sat on was unclean. 12 years, whatever she touched was unclean. For 12 years, she was ostracized because people didn't want to come anywhere near her. For 12 years, her children couldn't come near her. For 12 years, her husband couldn't touch her. For 12 years, she couldn't go anywhere. Or if she went, she had to wait when there would be no one around. Because if anyone touched her, even by accident, they would be unclean. So, having to follow the ritual of the law for a normal cycle for 12 years had to have been horrendous to her. So when this woman heard about Jesus, heard about him, it says, she had already heard about the miracles, the signs, and the wonders. She said, I've done everything else. When we have reached the end, when we've done everything that we could possibly do, we've talked to everybody we could talk to. We've prayed, we've fasted, but we haven't touched Jesus. He oftentimes becomes the last means that we turn to. And in her case, he was the last means. Perhaps she just didn't think about it. Maybe she hadn't heard about the miracles. Maybe she didn't know anything about him at the time when she was going back and forth to the doctor. And you may be going back and forth to the doctor and getting all of these tests ran and getting all of these diagnoses. But have you talked to the Lord about what's going on with you? Because he wants us to talk to him about what's going on. He already knows what's going on in our body. We know that. But he wants us to talk to him about what's going on in our bodies. So he already knows. He knows what's going on in our bodies, but he just wants us to bring it to him. So I encourage you, if you haven't, try Jesus. I know it's kind of like a cliche. After we've done everything else, you might as well try Jesus. And sometimes we say that as if it's a bad thing. But no, I remember when those things, when I did have those fibroid tumors, I was just devastated really, because I knew that I had to have a hysterectomy. That was the solution, because of the massiveness. And I did go to Jesus about it. I talked to him about it. I said, God, you know what's going on with my body. You created this body, but I trust you. I trust you. If I have to have the surgery, then so be it. But I know you're a healer. You can end this right now. But I talked to him about it because there was psychological issues that I was going through, thinking about it all. Like, oh my God, children and or the lack of children, not being able to have children, and making me feel less than a woman. All these thoughts was coming through my mind, and this is for someone out there who might be experiencing that. He wants us to talk to him about it. So she was desperate. She needed a solution. And it says that she said, she heard about him and she decided that I'm going to take a chance. Let's go on to verse 28. It says, but if she is cleansed of her discharge, then she shall count for herself 7 days, and after that she shall be clean. And on the 8th day she shall take for herself 2 turtle doves, 2 young pigeons, and bring them to the priest to the door of the tabernacle of meeting. So this is hope for someone who has been cleansed. But this woman doesn't know what is going to happen. All she is thinking about is that I heard about this man. I need to take a chance. This was a risky decision. She had to make up in her mind. She said, if I just touch him, she had to make it up in her mind. It was a risky decision because, again, crowds of people were around Jesus. How are we going to get to Jesus? How am I even going to get to him? It's almost impossible, if not impossible, to get to him. But a desperate situation, which is what she was in, calls for desperate measures. What are you going to be willing to do? What are you willing to do to stop the hemorrhaging, to stop the loss? Because uncleanness, whether it's uncleanness of the spirit, uncleanness of the soul, it doesn't just affect you. It doesn't just affect me. It affects everyone around us. It affects the people that we come into contact with. Our bitterness affects people that we come into contact with. Anger affects the people that we come into contact with. Unforgiveness, pride, any of those issues that we're hemorrhaging from and have for years, and especially if we've been hemorrhaging for years, it affects the people that we come into contact with. And in some situations, people don't even want to be around us, so it jeopardizes and sabotages our relationships, and people don't want to be around a bitter person or a prideful person or a person who has unforgiveness because it just does something to us psychologically. Okay, so she had to be willing to take a risk. Let's go back to Mark chapter 5 and let's see what we're doing. What's going on here? Okay. All right. Yes, Mark chapter 5. Mark chapter 5. Okay. All right. So we are down to, let's go back to 25. Now a certain woman had a flow of blood for 12 years, had suffered many things from many physicians. She spent all that she had and was no better, but rather grew worse. 27. When she heard about Jesus, okay. It says that she came behind him in the crowd and touched his garment. She touched his garment, for she said, if only I may touch his clothes, I shall be made whole. She didn't say anything about touching his person. She said, if I just can touch his clothes, okay? She came up in the press. Some translations say she came up in the press. She came up. Can you imagine trying to work? I don't know about you, but there was one time when I did try to work my way from the front to the back. I mean, it was so many people and I'm just trying to maneuver and excuse me. I'm sorry. I stepped on a person's foot. I'm sorry. Because people will look at you kind of funny because everybody wants to get to the front. Everybody wants to touch Jesus. Everybody wants to see Jesus up close and personal. So she had to really press her way to get to him. Now, think on this. Let's go back. If it's a crowd of people and a throng of people, do you not think that people touched her and she was touching people? Oh, yes. She was being touched. People were touching her. So, she had to be in a situation where I'm sure she was thinking, nobody really knows what's going on with me, but what if somebody sees me What if somebody that sees me, that knows what's going on with me, see me, and here I am in a crowd of people trying to make my way through a crowd of people. They're touching me and I'm touching them, whether we want to or not. And someone sees me and go, that's Ellen, she's unclean. Her life would have been in jeopardy because she was putting other people's lives in jeopardy too. You know, it makes me almost think about the pandemic itself, you know, the COVID, you know, it's contagious. And being in the environment of people, you know, and now that things are just back to normal, as the world thinks that it is, there's no such thing. We'll never be back to normal, but life is just going on. People are back in environments where, you know, we are surrounded by people and people are around you and you don't know who has COVID and who doesn't have COVID. And we already, and I'm not going there about boosters and shots and all that kind of stuff. You don't know who's around you. You don't know who has it. You don't know who doesn't have it. So you have to be very aware of your surroundings. But if you're in this kind of an environment, this woman had to take a chance. She had to take a chance to get to the front because she wasn't going to touch him from the back. She had to get to the front. So she had to risk being seen. She had to risk being noticed or being acknowledged, or someone, you know, maybe seeing her that knows her and knows her condition. Okay. But she said, if I may touch his clothes, I shall be made whole. Okay. She was willing to do that. Desperate situations calls for desperate measures and taking a risk. Sometimes you just have to take a risk, not worry about what people are going to think, not worry about what people are going to say, not even depend on people. You know, there was another account with the pool of Bethesda that when an angel came down at certain times and touched the waters would swirl and the first person to get in that water would be healed. And there was a man who laid there and he had been laying there. I think the time was 38 years. I'm not sure about that, but you can look it up. And Jesus came to him and said something to him. He said, will you be made well? Evidently, he had to have been standing back and watching to see what happened at that time. And, you know, and I would, you know, probably not be wrong in thinking that after a certain time, the man probably maybe just even gave up in trying to get, because he shared with Jesus when he said, will you be made well? Will you be made whole? Do you want to be made well? Do you want to be made whole? He said, every time I try to get in the water, somebody gets in front of me. Jesus never even answered the question. He never even responded to his response. Because we can't make excuses, and sometimes we can be so despondent and so despairing because our efforts at getting hold and our efforts at getting well and better are thwarted. We get disappointed because we tried this and we tried that and it didn't work. And then sometimes, you know, we actually may think that it's somebody's responsibility to help us to that degree. You know, well, you know, nobody will take me to the doctor, or nobody will go and get my medicine, or, you know, I tried this, but every time I try this, you know, my family says, well, you keep doing that and you keep going there. And, you know, we want to shift the blame for why we are not getting well. Well, you don't know what so-and-so did to me. I can't forgive them. We're shifting the blame for why we don't want to be well. Jesus didn't say anything about why you were walking in and had unforgiveness in your heart. He just said, do you want to be delivered from unforgiveness? Do you want to be delivered from bitterness? Do you want to be delivered from pornography and addictions? Not making excuses for them and not expecting and depending on other people to help us in our deliverance. So, you know, and so, you know, Jesus healed the man, but I love the fact that he asked him, do you want to be made well? So, you know, this woman, when she heard about Jesus, she came behind him and she touched him because she said, if only I may touch his clothes, I will be made well. And look at verse 29. It says, immediately, the blood, the fountain of her blood was dried up immediately. And she felt in her body that she was healed. Not only did it dry up, but she felt it and she knew it. I don't know what that feeling was, especially from a physical ailment like this. I don't know, but I know the feeling. If it's a spiritual ailment, I know if it's a soulish ailment, that feeling of being free, that feeling of being light and like a burden was lifted off of you when you are delivered from unforgiveness or delivered from pride or delivered from shame or delivered from guilt. You feel light. You feel like something left you It puts a pep in your step and a smile on your face. So it says that she felt that she was delivered and healed. And Jesus, verse 30, immediately, I like that word immediately. Immediately is found so much in the Bible as it relates to Jesus. Things that happened immediately. And Jesus immediately, knowing in himself that power had gone out of him. Dunamis, dynamite, power had gone out of him. It took some virtue out of him to heal that disease. You know, I know there's been a couple times when I prayed for people and laid hands on people and prayed for them to be delivered of a thing. And man, when they were delivered, I literally felt weak. It's like it took something out of me, and that it did. It took the power of God. And, you know, I remember the time when I went to Africa and, you know, we were doing meetings. My husband and I, went as missionaries, and we were doing meetings after meetings after meetings almost every night. And I'm telling you, I would come home and I would be drained, because when you are operating in the Spirit and the power of God comes on you to deliver and to heal and to set free, you are a flesh being. When that power goes, you're drained. So Jesus, who walked as a man on earth now, okay, he was in the flesh. He walked on earth in the flesh. The Word was God. The Word was with God, and the Word became flesh. So he had physical limitations in the flesh as he walked the earth. He said that he felt that power had gone out of him. He turned around and said, "Who touched my clothes? Who touched my clothes?" Look at what it says in verse 31. But his disciples said to him, "You see the multitude thronging you, and you say, 'Who touched me?' Duh. All these people around, everybody's touching you." You know. But Jesus said, he looked around to see who had done this thing. Jesus wasn't talking about the regular normal touch. This touch was different because it took power from him. When was the last time that you touched Jesus? You pulled on him so much so that you took power out of him. That you prayed and you cried out to God from the bottom of your heart so powerfully. And God heard your prayer and you felt delivered, but God felt power. It just pulled him, pulled the power, it pulled the virtue, it pulled the dunamis out of him. But the woman, fearing and trembling, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. She was fearing and trembling because she said, I'm found out. They know now that something is wrong with me. Still don't know exactly what the problem was, but something was going on with her because she said, I did. And it said that she told him the whole truth. Well, it said that she told him the whole truth. So evidently she did say to him what the issue was. I've been bleeding for 12 years and all these people around her were probably like, oh my God, I touched her. She touched me. You can imagine the response of people because people don't know what you're going through. You know, they look at you and you look all nicely put together on the outside, man and woman. But on the inside, they have no clue. You are hemorrhaging, you are leaking, you are bleeding. They don't know until you share, until you say. So she told him the whole truth. And this is what he said. He said, daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your affliction. Your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your affliction. 3 things Jesus told her. Your faith has made you healed, or your faith has made you well, or made you whole, as other translations say. Made you whole, because she wasn't whole. Like I said, on the outside, everything looked fine, except she had that issue that caused all kinds of other issues. Uncleanness causes other issues in our lives. We already said that. But so Jesus said, you are made whole now, spirit, soul, and body. We want to be whole, spirit, soul, and body. I do, and I know you do too. So go in peace, because now she can go in peace, and be healed. Okay, so now she can go and make that offering that we saw in Leviticus. I think it was, she had to wait 7 days. And then she could go and offer the 2 turtle doves. So, that was just powerful in and of itself. Having a great ending, that she was made well, that, her faith was not in vain. Her efforts were not in vain. The risk that she took was not in vain. Okay? So the penalty for breaking the law would have been you had been cut off. So, again, she is fine. She was healed, and now she can make reparations for her healing. So there are 3 things that must happen. There are 3 things that we're going to take a quick look at that must happen before healing begins. But before we do, if anything that you've heard thus far has been of any value to you, have opened up your eyes, have opened up your ears to where you can hear more clearly, if anything has been of value to you and has made a difference in you just thus far, why don't you go ahead and give us a thumbs up? Okay? All right. So now let's look at these 3 things. 3 things for a healing to begin. Number 1, you have to have a mindset to do something. You have to get up off of the bottom and do something. A mindset that, you know what? I don't like living like this. I don't like being like this. I don't like walking in unforgiveness is miserable. Walking in bitterness is miserable. I've been harboring and feeling shame and low self-esteem long enough. You have to make up in your mind, not my mind, and I can't make that up for you. You can't make up my mind for me that, you know what, I'm going to do something. I know people that are still struggling with issues because their mind's not made up yet. And a lot of them will come for prayer, or they'll call you for prayer, and you're praying about the same situation. Their mind is not made up yet. That I've got to do something about this. When I decide that I'm going to do something about it, like she decided, you know what, I've got to do something about this. Then she did the next thing. She reached out. She reached out. We must reach out. So number 1, we must have a mindset to do something about the situation. Number 2, we must reach out. Okay? She had to get close enough to Jesus. Again, the action is not in the back. All the action is up in the front. All the action is where Jesus is. When you're sitting in church, move up to the front where it's hot, where the fire is, like the old folks say. Come on up here and sit on the front, baby, where the fire is, where it's hot. I want to be where the fire is, so that unlike that man at the pool of Bethesda, I'm going to make sure I'm on that front ledge. So when that angel stirs the water, I'm just going to roll over into the water or something. But if you're not up close to Jesus, if you're not close to Jesus, if you're in and out of the things of God, in and out of church, 1 minute you're high, 1 minute you're low, 1 minute you're praying, 1 minute you're fasting, 1 minute you're reading your Bible, the next minute you're not. If you're not close in His presence and being in His presence, we have to practice to be in God's presence. Every day that we wake up, we shut off the cell phone, shut off the internet. There's times when you just have to shut things off. And for me personally, nothing happens and I don't do anything until I first check in with Him first thing in the morning. But there has to be that reaching out. I'm reaching out. Father, I'm reaching out to you this morning. Holy Spirit, what is it that you would have for me to do today? What's on your agenda? What's on your plan today? What plans do you have for me today? Order my steps today. What would you have me to do? Where am I going? Reaching out. You have to reach out. This woman reached out to Jesus. She said, if I could just touch His clothes, I'll be healed. She already made it up in her mind. It was no doubt in her mind that maybe I'll be healed. She said, no, I will be healed. So you have to have the faith to believe that when you have a mindset to do something, and then when you reach out to God, when you reach out to Jesus, He will answer, He will deliver. So you have to reach out, second thing. And the third thing, you have to take that step. It's one thing to say, you know what, I'm going to do something about this addiction. And you just sit there. Or you make a couple of phone calls to, maybe some counseling places or whatever. But you don't go anywhere. You don't take the first step to go. You got to take the first step. This woman was all the way in the back, and she had to make her way all the way to the front through these people. So she had to take the first step and then the next step. And I promise you that that first step is always the hardest one to take. It always is. But when you take that first step, you're able to put that foot in front of that foot again, and that foot in front of that foot again, step by step, step by step. You may be thinking even right now, Renee, there's no way I can get out of this. I've tried this and I've tried that, and I'm just tired. But are you tired of trying, or are you tired of the situation? Because you got to get to the front. If you can just get to the front, if you can just get into the presence of God and say, God, you know what? I'm tired of all of this. I'm tired of going through it. I'm ready to make a change. I'm ready for you to make a change in my heart and life, because you can't do it in your own strength. You're not going to be able to do it. You've been tussling with this thing, whatever it is, for the longest time. Now it's time for you to just say, you know what, Lord, let me get in his presence. Let me shut all the distractions, all the things out of my ear. I had to go away a few weeks ago because I just needed to hear from God. So, a few weeks ago, I just said, God, I've got to get away. I've got to go away. I need to hear from you. I want to hear you in these ears. I don't want any other voice but your voice in these ears. And I was on the highway and I was in the left-hand lane, and in the right-hand lane, there was a big tractor trailer. And on the back of it, in big black bold letters, it said, "No distractions, you and me." No distractions, you and me. Oh my goodness. I'm just crying and driving. I said, okay, God, that's what I want. I don't want any distractions. I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't want to hear anyone's voice. I just want to hear your voice. So I had to have a mindset that, you know what, I'm going to do something. I need to do something. That was number one. And number two, I had to reach out. I reached out and I made reservations at a hotel. I said, I'm going to go stay in a hotel, which is what I did. And then I had to take the step and go. And it was a little drive, but I was determined that I needed for God to do something for me. And he was right, no distractions. I didn't call anybody. I didn't text anybody. I didn't even do social media. I didn't. You have to be and get to that place where you are going to make it up in your mind, have a mindset that I'm going to do something. This is the day I'm going to do something. And then reach out to Jesus. Reach out to Father. He is a loving Father. He's waiting for you. He already knows, but he's waiting for you to say, Daddy, I need you. Father, I need you. And then take the first step. So here is your action step. I want to pray for you. I want you to really sincerely surrender and give your heart. It says surrender your mind. Don't worry about it. Don't think about it. I just want to pray for you. We'll start there. Father, this person that is going to hear this, either they're hearing it now or they'll hear it later. I pray right now, Lord, that they have come to the end of their rope and they realize that they've done everything that they can possibly do, that there's no other source or even resource but you. And now they are willing and ready to say, Lord, I come to you. First of all, Lord, I believe, Jesus, that you are the Son of God. I believe that God raised you from the dead. I believe that you took my sins upon you, that you took my place, that you took all of my griefs and all of my sorrows upon yourself. And then you went to the cross where you left them there. You died and you were buried, but 3 days later you rose victoriously. Even before you were nailed to the cross, you went to the whipping post and you received 39 stripes on your back for my healing. You received a stripe for depression. You received a stripe for cancer. You received a stripe for high blood pressure. You received a stripe for anxiety. You received a stripe for tumors. You received a stripe for any sickness or disease I might have in my body right now. So by your stripes, I am healed. You was acquainted with my griefs and my sorrows. A crown of thorns was pushed down on your head so that I could have peace. So right now, Jesus, come into my heart, come into my life. I give my life to you. I want to make an exchange, your life for my life. Your life for my life. I lay it down to you even now. I surrender and I give everything to you. I speak healing to that body right now, and I command that body to line up and function and operate the way that God called it to and designed it to and created it to. And I speak peace to that troubled mind right now in the name of Jesus. Great peace have those whose mind is stayed on Jesus. Get your mind on Jesus even now. Just think about everything that he did for you so that you could be free, so that you could be healed, so that you could be delivered. He met you. He was waiting for you to reach out. And even as you're reaching out for him right now, virtue and power is going to leave his body and come into yours. And you will receive power to be made whole, his power. So Lord, we thank you even now. We praise you and we thank you that you have given us the victory. We are victorious in you. We are healed in you. We are delivered in you. We are set free and made free in you. And he that the Son sets free is free indeed. In the name of Jesus. Hallelujah. When I was leaving one location and going to another one, got caught at a stoplight, and Holy Spirit said, look to the right. And I looked to the right, and there was a storage place, you know, where you store things. And they had a marquee, a sign. And on the sign it says, God ain't done yet. I said, okay, Lord. Again, driving and crying. God ain't done yet. He was waiting for you to come from the back and come to the front. If you can just get to the front, just get to where Jesus is, just get into his presence. You don't have to go to a church. You can ask the Holy Spirit's presence to come right where you are. Holy Spirit, you are welcome in this place, and he will come. Just get to the front. Just get to the front, and you will be made whole. Well, our time is up, and you know, as always, please hit the like button, subscribe, because I want to make sure that you get all of the upcoming videos. That's the way that you will be notified when a video comes out. Make sure that you go into your settings in YouTube. There's some settings, and click on notifications when you go there, and you'll see it. So just check all of the boxes so that you will be able to get a notification when a new video comes out. You'll be notified. I don't want you to miss any of these great videos on victorious living and having a victorious life, because it is yours. If you have any comments, please leave them in the comments section down below. Any questions, leave them in the section down below. We'll try to answer any questions that you might have, but I want to hear from you. I always love to hear from you. So please leave your comments. And so, until the next time, I want you to remember that a victorious life is yours.